Good morning and welcome to a Yarn Live. This is a special edition. We are looking at digital twins and this is version 2. So you might have seen the earlier session that we did with Neil from LINQ and of course Timberlands. And today we have Sally Garrett from the NZDF, and what a cool session we're going to have. We've done a little bit of a preamble, of course, so we know what we're going to be talking about, and I've got the highlights in my mind and there's some really cool stuff. But again, it's looking at what these new things are, these digital twins. And for some people, they're completely new. For some people, they've got a bit of an idea. So we'll look at that in a moment. But of course, as always, we'd like to start off with asking our guests to introduce themselves. So we get a bit of an idea of their background in this field and what they're doing, but also a bit of a personal background, because this is AFQY, and most of you know that I'm Ryan the Lion, and the use of the nickname is all about bringing my full self to work. We have a nickname with our friends, we have a nickname with our mates, and I use mine at work. So shall we not put Sally on the spot first time? We won't go for the traditional woman first. We'll go for Neil, having been here, done that, to set the example. And Sally will get you to come in and close up on the intro. So Neil, over to you first.
Yeah, morning, Ryan. Thanks for having me back. I can't remember what I said last time, so I'll just reintroduce myself. So Neil Calvert, Chief Executive LINQ. I've been in New Zealand for 12 years, as you can hear from my accent. I'm from the UK originally, but I do classify myself as a Kiwi these days. So if it's black versus white, it's always black on the rugby field. So hopefully that gives you a bit of context. What do I do? I'm all about helping organisations implement successful change. That's what the platform does. That's what my role in the business is. Outside of work, I paddle. I do F45 whilst I still can. I'm 50 next year. It's becoming a little bit hard. I've got really, really sore legs at the moment from a session a couple of days ago, so the recovery is taking longer and longer. Work from home, have done for a good number of years. COVID hasn't really impacted me too much with that regard, but I am seriously looking forward to being able to get back out and see people face to face, and sit in a proper cafe and have a real coffee. So hopefully one day we can set that up. That's the current ambition.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Sally, we've already got our invites for that 50th birthday party. So we'll maybe be having a little bit more than a coffee when that comes around. But yeah, that does sound like a good idea. And we didn't even get to your Ghostbusters or your R2-D2 on the back shelf, but we had a good view there. So with that, Sally, you've now got the example there. So if we could ask you to kindly introduce yourself, of course, the work aspect, and a little bit about what you do outside of work, perhaps.
Hi, I'm Sally Garrett. I am the Future Technologies Program Manager for a small unit in the New Zealand Defence Force called Emerging Tech, and we're all about seeing how this cool emerging tech stuff that's coming out, how we can actually bring it into defence. Our motto, I suppose, is moving defence at the speed of opportunity. So we look to see where some of this tech that's out there can actually improve business outcomes and look to prove it before investment. A little bit about myself. I come from a family of 7, born in Taranaki. I have 4 children myself, so very busy. I have a passion in music and have played in brass bands for most of my life, even performed in the Edinburgh Tattoo. And really grateful for this opportunity to come and talk to you guys today.
Wow, performed in the Edinburgh Tattoo. That is, I always watch that each year when they've had it, because I think the last couple of years, for obvious reasons, they haven't. But always watch that with great interest for the, it's just like one team comes in, the next team comes in, and it's quite enthralling. But when I was talking about this beforehand, and I absolutely just happened to say, mention a bit about yourself. Perhaps you come from I think I've even said a farm in Taranaki, and you come from Taranaki.
It made me laugh.
And hey, look, there's no Defence Force technology used in that. There was a complete human guess on my behalf. But 7 kids, that almost sounds like the Ford pack, coming from Taranaki. And I think that's what the Sam was.
Although we had 5 girls and 1 boy, so
Well, probably back
More
then
for
it
the
wouldn't have
team.
been, but these days, if you look at the Black Ferns, them very easily could have been in one day rugby terms. But fantastic stuff, team. Right, we're set now. Let's get into digital twins. So before we get into the NZDF story and the cool stuff that we're going to hear about, Neil, would you be able to give us a bit of a overview, some context of digital twins? Like, let's take into account there'll be a mix of people that have seen it, that haven't seen, heard us talk about it before. So you can give us a little bit of a, I guess, foundation knowledge for the viewers, so they will then have a good understanding when we talk about the NZDF practical examples.
Yeah, sure. So the simplest way, if we think about digital twin as a whole, it's a digital representation of a physical thing, a physical asset. So we're building a model, effectively, of something that exists. So the best thing to think about, to kind of get your head around it, probably all seen the movie Apollo 13. There was an accident with that caused an explosion. They had a carbon dioxide issue in the space vessel. On Earth, the scientists used the equipment that they had in space in order to put together a solution that resolved the carbon dioxide scrubber issue, and then they built it by radioing the instructions back to the team. They built it in space, and that idea that you've got something over here that represents something over here, and you can interact between the two, is effectively the concept that digital twin provides for us. Now, for LINQ, we specifically talk about the digital twin of the organization. So we're kind of abstracting away from what you might think of designs of jet engines and wind turbines, and actually thinking about, well, how do we model what an organization does and how it does it? And so the digital twin of the organization is effectively a model that represents how an organization operates. So you account for the work that goes on, the people who are involved, the systems that people have access to, and the data and information that is needed to enable all of that to happen. So hopefully that's a bit of context around our bit of what is a really increasing industry. It's becoming quite significant as a technology.
And we'll hear some of the impacts towards the end of the story around why it's an increasing industry, because I think my personal realization, which I won't let the cat out of the bag yet, as we were talking in our pre-session, really made sense to me. So first of all, let's hear about the NZDF story. So Sally, this is your opportunity to share. How are you looking at how are you looking at digital twins? What use cases have you deployed them in already, and what's on the horizon? If you maybe give us a bit of an overview to start with, and we'll start looking at some of the detail.
Awesome. So we're relatively new to digital twins in the NZDF. We can see the benefits of those twins. And so what we've started doing is what we call running a proof of value in our personal onboarding process to see if we can understand, well, first of all, to capture the current state of exactly what we do, and therefore be able to simulate what some future states would look like and the impact of those future states. So we worked with the personal onboarding part of the organisation who look at managing the personnel risk for the organisation to see, have we, the people that we're employing, are they the right people? Can we enable them to look at some of this information that we have? As you can imagine, NZDF has a whole lot of different security classifications and information security that we need to think about. So making sure that the people that we employ are appropriate to do the tasks that we want them to do is really important to us. So there were 3 teams that look after this process in varying stages, from onboarding through to ongoing, what's the risk looking like for our people. And so we thought, this is a really good area. We want to do some transformation here. We want to make sure that we're really effective and efficient in the way that we're doing things. So it's a good opportunity to test out what a digital twin of the organisation could do for us. So that's been our main use case to start off with.
Cool. So capturing the current state, if this is a new process, what are some of the things that you did that were maybe different to how it's been done in the past when capturing the current state? Can you give us a little bit of an idea? Like I'm envisaging in my head a little bit of a process map, something like that. That would probably be reasonably similar. But what detail could you add to about the picture of the capturing the current state?
So what we wanted to do, which is possibly a little different than the way we've done things before, is really involve the teams on the ground and how they and what they do, and make them feel like they're involved in part of the change and own that. So we ran separate workshops with them. They were only about 2 hours each. I think we spent 4 hours, was it, Neil, with each team, and sat down and captured exactly what they did. Now, rather than use the normal post-it notes on the wall type example, we captured the information through conversation straight into the tool. And Neil here was the person on the ground capturing all the information. And that was really interesting because it enabled not only the team members, and some of them were new to the organisation, understand, the full picture, but also gave the manager to ask some questions who wouldn't normally be in the depth of what's going on. So it was really good from a collaboration point of view, but also from a capture point of view. So rather than have these notes all over the wall, at the end of it, it was already in the tool with all of the data that's associated with it. The other thing that I just wanted to talk about was, so not only do we capture the process, but we capture the people and the roles that are required to do each task, and also the information and systems, which is typical in a digital twin. So you're capturing everything about that whole thing. It's kind of a bottom-up process, but we found it really interesting for the people in the room to be able to have that conversation, think about why they do things, and get the antidotes from the guys on the ground as to what was important and why they did things they did the way they were doing it.
Awesome. So, Neil, you're invited to jump in at any stage now. So one of the things I picked up on there was the capturing it directly into the tool, not on the sticky notes. And, I think anyone who's been in one of those workshops, run one of those workshops, we've all probably in our career done this, and you have this massive wall of sticky notes, and probably looks like my media wall behind me. It looks like a rainbow of different coloured media notes, and we put coloured dots on this and this, and everything. The amazing bubbling discussion that you have against that wall gets lost by the time it comes out in a report a week later. So you're talking about capturing it directly into the tool, and having everybody. I think you talked about having some, let's say, the coal face people there who maybe normally wouldn't be in this process. So it sounds like some really great ways of capturing the information and getting people involved. Neil, would you be able to share a little bit more about some of this process from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it's a real differentiator. In fact, I was chatting to somebody yesterday, and we talked about the process of capture inside LINQ, and they also related it to the old post-it note on the wall. And their comment was, as soon as you leave the meeting room, actually, it's forgotten, and you kind of don't know what's going to happen with all of that content. Now, you've just taken up a bunch of people's time. You've asked them some probing questions. You've asked them to maybe generate ideas about things. You've written it onto post-it notes. You put it on a wall, and then they leave and have no real idea about whether that's been heard, understood, was useful. There's a real, I think, disconnect between taking time away from people and asking them to do this, and then the output that's generated. So we kind of get rid of all of that, because you are creating a digital asset for the business in real time as people are talking to you, so they feel heard. Because you have to document what they've said. So if you say, it takes me 30 seconds and I have to click this thing and create this information entity inside this database, you're not just like, 30 seconds, that doesn't matter, we're not going to consider that. One organization I was working with, they do exactly that. They have to register information that they create in their information asset management system. It takes them 30 seconds. So as an individual, you tend to dismiss it. But when they then said, and we do that 270,000 times a year, because that's how many information assets are created, and that's only 1/3 of their information asset register. That equates to over, it's nearly 1.5 FTEs of time per year. So imagine 1.5 people just sat there, and that's all they did every single day was that. So you can quantify things really quickly that then are impactful for the business, because you say, well, what if we automated that and you didn't actually have to do that? So you only get that insight, I think, by listening, by responding, by being able to create it into a tangible thing that people can then look at and go, yeah, that's what we do. And the inquiry starts immediately. I mean, I think, Sally, you'll agree, one of the things that happened with the team was they started questioning themselves what they were doing and why they were doing it, and was there a better way, and could we hand this information off to the next part of the process in a different way to make it better. And that was just an outcome of the conversation and seeing it, rather than I've lost the post-it note where I made a suggestion. You can, so you get to respond in real time. And I think that's a significant value add in the process to create the model that then drives the insights.
Yes, there's a saying I heard, I don't know if it's appropriate, but it's called talking around the edges. And one of the things that bring back the discussion was when people talk, and like I say something to you, or say something to both of you, Sally hears one thing, Neil hears another, you go off and do your parts, and they end up being completely separate or conflicting, or whatever the case might be, because you've interpreted what I said differently, or what I've asked for differently. Whereas by having it visually, the described process written down, I think you also mentioned, I wanted to come back to this one, Sally, that it has the roles and the people written into it as well. So it's not just a process, but we know that, say, Neil's doing this part, Sally's doing that part, Ryan's doing this part. So if people didn't or weren't aware, then they can be like, oh, I didn't realize you did that. And it just adds clarity, because it's, as we said, makes the intangible visible. So some of those realizations, or some of those moments that Neil's highlighted, can you remember any of the sort of bigger moments that the team were thoroughly sort of taken back by, or surprised by?
Yeah, there was some really interesting things that came out. There was one piece where we captured the wait time for decisions. So the team would do a whole lot of work, then they'd have basically the process stopped while they were waiting for a decision. So that enabled the conversation with the people making the decision, saying, well, do you really need to make this decision? Can it be made within the team? Is there a different way of doing this? Or actually them being able to see the impact of that wait time to the whole process, and how it made things take a lot longer. So it opened up those discussions and made it really, really visible to management as to where things could be done better, but also for the team themselves to take ownership of what they could do to make things better. Like Neil alluded to, there was some cases where within the team, so one team would do their piece of work, then the next team would do their piece, and they would use some information from the previous team's work, and they would then go and redouble and recheck and look at that information again. So it enabled the teams to talk about what they actually needed, why they were duplicating this effort, and how they could look at things differently and better. But also from a systems and technology point of view, what could we do to improve the way they work? How could we make our systems a bit more reliable for this type of information? Yep. So they don't have to go and, take it out and remessage it and do all of those kind of things.
So what you've described for me is that phrase that you introduced me to, evidence-based decision-making. So everyone would have heard for a long time data-driven decisions. But when we talk about evidence-based, we're including a lot more than just, say, data, aren't we? And there's some good examples there where, being able to sit around and, I was almost going to say sit around the campfire, and almost feels like that when you're thinking of defence. Visiting them, everyone out in the out in the bush and camouflage and all the rest of it, but no, this is in the office. But the ability to see it and be able to look at the evidence and go, well, why do we need this wait time? The impact this wait time has on what we're trying to achieve is monumental. Is there a way where we can change it? And having all the different parties involved, all different stakeholders, the ones who are holding up the show, have the ability to say, well, actually it could be made over here, and we could speed that up and we can enjoy that benefit. So with that, are we able to look at any? Are there any other impacts or benefits or noticeable return on investment? I guess is the general way people would frame up that question. Where through this process, the results have been yes. You talk about saving time or reducing time. Is there any way you can quantify some of the impacts of what this has achieved in that first process before we go to the next one?
So apart from just capturing the current state, what we then were able to do was to run a couple of future state models. So one was, what could the teams themselves do within their own mandate to make things better? And the second one was around understanding that there's some new systems coming down the line. If they were in place, how would that impact your process? And so it really enabled the team to be aware of the change that was coming, but also to feel like they could buy into that whole process. So real benefit for us was the change is all about people, right? If you can't get the people to adopt and to change what they're doing, then then it's not going to happen, or you're going to have problems. So enabling the guys down on the floor to be part of it was a huge thing. The other thing, which was another benefit, was the ability to say, what happens if we have a whole lot of new people come into defence to do type of work? Might be contractors, might be employees. How can we, if we had a whole, if there were a lot more people coming in, what would that do? Can we simulate this? What would that mean? How many people would we now need? What's the impact on our systems, etc.? So that was really valuable. What else did we have, Neil?
Well, the simulation one is part of it. So we'll just touch on that because we've got a couple of questions I'm going to come to. So I'll pop this one up so you can see it for a little minute while I talk about simulation, and from none other than Debbie Howarth, NZDF, I think is Director of Engagement. If I know Debbie, so I'm just trying to remember her official title. But you have a look at that question because that's about the post-it notes, and there's been a few discussions around just that simple part of it. But the simulation, so this is one of the big benefits. I'll take that down for a moment. One of the big benefits is simulation. So I think, Neil, you talk about if you're going to do a change program, then this enables you to, I'm just trying to remember your phrase, you'll know your phrase, but be able to see or understand the impacts you're going to have. So simulation. So you have the existing current state mapped out and you go, what happens if we tweak this bit or change that bit? And that's where you can do the simulation to find out what would happen or understand what would happen. And then by understanding that impact, you go, well, it's going to increase the time, so we're going to have a much longer wait. That's not what we want because we've just tried to reduce the wait by changing another part. But it enables you to simulate it, which if we think of, I guess, in some regards, gaming and whatnot, it's almost like being able to play the next level of the game and see what's going to happen before it happens. So, the simulation aspect. So you ran 2 simulations on the current state and had some good findings?
Yes. So you capture what your future state might look like, and then the tool enables you to see what the impact is, how many more people you might need, or how many people you free up to do other things.
Yeah.
Other, what else was there?
Things like we spot the information gap often, so you want to, for me, the simulation is, so it's a response to the current state. I've built my current state. I've found all of these things out about it that I might want to then improve or change or keep the same or whatever the response is. The future state is the simulation of where I would like to be. So we ignore the implementation piece, which is a big chunk of work that needs to go on, but we imagine that we've resolved all of our current state challenges, and that's what the simulated future state is. So the tool then just gives you feedback around, well, this is the impact on your people. You might have people who are having to change what they're doing. You might fundamentally change roles. You could reallocate work to teams. You might just take time away from people because part of the impact is we're going to automate a whole bunch of actions that are currently done by people. and that just takes the pressure away from them. If we can remove admin time, right? So we stop people having to do repetitive tasks by automation. We just get to see what that would look like. And it formulates the conversation with the whole team around, and the leadership, and your sponsor and your budget holders. If we undertake this implementation to achieve this future state, are we now operating in a way that makes sense to us? And that could be a technology implementation. It could be just a real simple process change. We're going to stop doing this because. So all of that came out. So with the teams, we did 2 versions. We did an immediate future state based on things that we found around their process and said, just stop doing this. We can see it adds no value. Just don't do it anymore. It's come from legacy kind of, and no one stopped to go, do we really need to keep doing that? And when you put teams together, they resolve that really quickly. So we modeled it so we could prove it. We can offer proof then to the leadership. The second future state was, as Sally said, NZDF are bringing in new technology all the time. There is some tech that is going to come in from a systems perspective that impacts this part of the organization. So we were able to start putting that technology into the model to help people understand how it would impact the way they work. Because we know, right? You don't just throw technology into an organization and go, done. The process has to evolve around it, and people have to evolve around their process. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So that second future state was a bit further reaching, a longer timescale of far horizon, on the basis that we knew some things about the technology that was coming in, so we could model their capability, and there were some gaps. But this is an ongoing progression. It's as we understand more about the change that's coming, we can provide the confidence that people understand how it will impact them, and ultimately that's what the simulation is all about.
Yep. So understand the future simulation is about understanding the impact any change will have. And that's where you've got this really cute slogan or tagline. I can't remember. It's annoying me on the tip of my tongue. I should have detailed it in our digital twin, and then I would have had the record there to refer back to. But coming back to
invest thousands before committing millions. Was it that one? Or?
No, not that one. No, not that one. It's something about change. It'll come out in conversation. But to come back to Debbie's question, this is a practical question of how does work with the online event? The post-it note bit is very hard online. So I think, how does it work with an online event? The post-it note.
I think what Debbie's, I think what she's saying is, how can you adapt it to work while you're having an online discussion like this? And quite a number of our capture sessions were online via Teams meetings. So Neil, you can probably talk to how this worked, but it's pretty.
It works,
similar
right?
to
And all through COVID is another reason why you have to make these things work. So when we run online events for this type of work, it's a facilitated conversation, just as it would be in person. LINQ is up on the screen, and as the conversation is taking place, the content is being generated in the platform, and so that's the visual whiteboard in effect. The nodes that get captured to create the model, because we have a structured language we capture to. That's there for everybody to see. We're labeling things, we're putting all of the metadata in, we're capturing time and cost and value and all of those things that we need. And people have that opportunity, because they can see the screen, to discuss in that forum, just as they would if they're around a table. So it's been it's a very easy transition actually, and I think as we've all become more used to Zoom and Teams over the last 18 months or so, it's becoming quite natural for people. So we haven't had much of an issue at all in adapting to this new world, for sure.
Cool. Well, hey, look, we're right on time, and I just want to check with you if we have to stick to military precision timing and move to closing remarks, or if we can look at the bit that we haven't quite covered yet was what are the if we've looked at personnel onboarding, what are the next pieces in line? I think looking at the estate was part of it, but do you have a couple of minutes just to give a quick run?
Just a couple of minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
So we've now moved on, and we're looking at defence estate infrastructure, and we're running a little proof with them to show them how the technology could help improve them with their big transformation. You probably heard that Defence is doing a big piece of work in the estate regeneration. So being able to, it's more about consistency of process, because we deal with a whole lot of different suppliers. So how can we capture the differences to inform how we and why we need to change? And the other area that we're also looking to is around the recruitment process. So very related to the personnel onboarding, it's how can we make that more effective and efficient? Everyone's having problems getting talent these days, so we need to make sure that we're on top of things there and make that a more effective process, not only for our internal people in processing, but also for our potential candidates. How can we make that a faster, smoother, better process for them? So we're looking at that area. And another area is sort of more the surrounding things around that personal onboarding process, who they interact with, and other parts of that organisation, so that we can get that all humming and get some insights into where would be the biggest bang for buck in change.
Wow.
Because we're all in investment tight times, so we have to make sure we spend the money in the right places. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, the standardization of the estate processes around regeneration of the estate, and just for people, when we're talking about estate, this is the physical infrastructure, the buildings, and did it include equipment, or was it just the buildings?
More the buildings and the locations, the camps and bases, what they need to look like to enable us to.
The stuff that was built 100 years ago has got to be rebuilt or upgraded for modern days, modern uses, etc. And the where the process is going to be applied or is going to help is around the standardization, so that think of it as simple things of purchasing and economies of scales. If we're doing all these bases differently, then there's no economies of scale. But if we are standardizing the process, then that's one, I guess, simple version that people who understand the old concept of economies of scale can start attaching that to the new process. Is that underway now, or is that about to embark?
The defence estate stuff has
well
started.
Underway. Yep.
Yeah, it's well underway. And the others are just about to kick off. So we're just getting into it. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Oh, Neil?
I was just saying busy end of the year, really. Just getting on and doing some more work. So
very good, very good. Well, you won't be able to run off and put on your Santa outfit just for a few weeks yet. Then, but what I was just going to say is, thank you very much for sharing that. Just to keep it on time, because we're 5 minutes over. What I'd like to do is give you a bit of time to think of closing remarks. And I'll just give a quick little summary of what we've heard today, so that people have got the context. Today's session was the second session around digital twins with Neil Calvert from LINQ, and second guest is Sally Garrett from the NZDF, who is the Emerging Technologies Program Manager, and the first one was timberlands, so looking at it from a forestry point of view. So there's very different applications, very different industries, and the processes that the digital twins were applied to were, first of all, the personnel onboarding and looking at the process. We heard about how it was captured in the current state with all the different stakeholders around the table, from those, say, at the coalface, as I like to describe it, through to those who maybe do the sign off and just put a signature somewhere and don't really see or have visibility of the whole process. And through that process, it made the intangible, the process that would normally be described, and one person does one part and doesn't know what the rest of the process is. Everyone gets to see the whole process laid out in front of them, and therefore they can see what it takes to achieve, from A to B or A to Z of a process. So that then they can start looking at simulations and different future states. And 2 simulations were run on this particular personnel onboarding, and they're able to see what the impacts were before they made the change. Therefore, they could decide, actually, it's a really good change to make. We'll go ahead and do it. or there's some unintentional consequences of that we didn't think would happen, and it's going to be bad, so we won't go ahead with those changes. And that's the benefits of simulating the digital twin. So you might have gathered, if you hadn't heard the definition, that a digital twin is a digital version or virtual version of a real thing. So it can be, as Neil described at the beginning, the Apollo spaceship, something that's real, and use another version to help understand what to do with the actual real thing. But it also applies to, as this discussion is all about, the LINQ work is around processes. So from supply chains to whatever the chain might be, or whatever the process might be. And today we've heard from Sally about how it's been applied to the personnel onboarding, now in current play with the state regeneration and some other work in the personnel. So with that team, I hope I've given a reasonable summary there. And I'll invite you to give us some closing remarks and thoughts you'd like people to walk away with as a key takeaway. So we start with you, Sally, if that's okay, and then we'll conclude with Neil.
Sure. So the key takeaways for me throughout this whole process have been about enabling the team to be involved in the change discussion, the evidence-based approach. So because you've captured the whole current state, what the people, systems, and information are there, you've got a dollar value attached to everything that you do. So that then helps inform and bring the people along as to why change is important. And in the personal onboarding case, it was really relevant for the team because they needed some more people. And this gave them the evidence to then be able to go and get those people, but also on how to improve the process themselves.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And over to you, Neil.
So I guess the thing I'd leave people with is if you really do want to make change successful, one of the ways of doing that is to understand the impact change is going to have on your business before you make the decision to invest in implementing the change. So you can do that by using digital twin of the organization, capturing the current state, gaining insight from that so you know where the challenges might be, where the opportunities lie. Simulate the change using future state, understand a comparison, and build really good business cases that you can take to leadership in order to get the money and the people and the resources that you need in order to get that change moving really quickly inside the organization.
And that's the key point. It's quick. It's really quick.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, I was just going to say two things. One, we've got one question I think would be good to see if we could answer the bits that you haven't already said. But also, Neil, you said it there. It was understand the impact of changes before you make them, I think is it. But we'll just pop this one up from Doug, if you don't mind. So you've kind of answered a little bit about this already, but was anything more that you possibly add around what have been the most obvious benefits that the staff saw and appreciated? Maybe there's some particular feedback that we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, so we asked for feedback from the people within the teams, and they all came back with really glowing feedback. They appreciated the chance to be part of the discussion. They appreciated the ability to talk about it all within the team so that other people who, if someone was doing something, this person over here didn't realise. So they appreciated that fact. They appreciated the ability to put their ideas out there and to say, what about if we did this? And, with management in the room, and it was a really, it was really empowering for them, wasn't it, Neil? There was one group who was just so busy because it was an understaffed group at the time. They appreciated having the time out to be able to look at it and to have some breathing space to enable this to happen. Neil, did you pick up on any other?
I guess the only other one is they took ownership. You end up with the people owning the change, and I think that's at that point it's always going to be successful because it's things that they're directly involved with. They understand the impact. They're motivated to deliver the change. They can see how it adds value to themselves, to the customer, to the organization, and that ownership is critical. It's not being done to them. Yeah. They are the ones that are taking the lead on the change that's happening, in that first instance. So that would be my biggest kind of, I guess, benefit of the people being involved.
Fantastic. Well, with that, team, I want to say thank you very much. Thank you for all that you've shared today, the closing remarks, and answering that last question that popped up during closing remarks. Thanks to Doug. I appreciate that. And yeah, it sounds like the benefits are absolutely clear. People are involved. It breaks down silos and opens up and gives the opportunity to be seen and heard and understand everyone else as well equally. People are making the change and owning it rather than being handed to them. So some really great takeaways there. And I just want to thank you very much for your time. And with that, we'll say ka kite anō to everybody out there, and look forward to following this up and finding out what other emerging technologies are happening, what happens in the future with the estate. So maybe we can look at a follow-up, and I don't know what time frame. We'll talk about that off camera. But look forward to hearing more about it, and just want to, again, thank you both for your time.
Thanks very much. Nice to see you guys.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Bye.
Alrighty. Thank you, team.